An hour in medieval Europe could run 40 minutes, or it could run 80. Same clock word, same sun, same day. And for roughly 1,000 years, almost nobody thought that was strange. Here's the part that should stop you. Daylight was always split into 12 equal pieces, no matter how much daylight there actually was. In June, each piece stretched close to 80 minutes. In December, the same 12 pieces barely lasted 40. A 1 o'clock in July and a 1 o'clock in January were not the same length of time. They just shared a name. We picture medieval life as loose about time. Wake with the sun, sleep with the dark, shrug at the rest. Drop that picture. It's almost backwards. The real system was strict enough to fine you, wake you at 2 in the morning, and lock you outside city walls if you were late. Centuries before any factory whistle, medieval Europe already had punch clocks. They just built them out of bells, shadows, candles, and stars instead of a face with 2 hands. Today we walk through the whole machine. The bell schedule that ran an entire town's day, and what happened to the people who missed it. The hour that changed size with the seasons, and the strange tools invented to track it in the dark. The device that stopped caring what the sun was doing at all, and the riot that followed. And the night a bell rang with no human hand on the rope, for the first time in history. Time was never something they simply had. It was something they built, by hand, hour by hour. If a Monday alarm ever ruined your morning, wait until you hear what a missed bell could cost someone in the year 1300. Let's start with the sound that ran their entire day. Not a whistle, not a horn. A rope, a bell, and one extremely tired monk. Picture a monastery at 2 in the morning. Pitch dark, freezing stone floor. Somewhere down a corridor, a monk called the Sacristan is already awake, walking toward a bell rope he is legally required to pull. That first service was called Matins, and it could start before 3 a.m. It was the opening move in a schedule so demanding it makes a modern 9 to 5 look relaxed. The medieval church divided each day into 8 services, known as the Canonical Hours. Matins, Lauds, Prime, Terci, Sext, None, Vespers, and Compline. Roughly 1 every 2 to 3 hours, day and night, forever. You were not gently reminded, you were summoned. Miss one, and the consequences ranged from extra psalms to public correction in front of the whole community. Some monasteries even assigned a monk called a circator to prowl the dormitory at night with a lamp, hunting for anyone who had dozed off instead of showing up for prayer. Oversleeping wasn't a personal failure. It was a violation somebody was paid to catch. The rules came from a text called the Rule of Saint Benedict, written around 530 AD, and monasteries across Europe were still following its schedule, with only minor local tweaks 800 years later. Here's a detail that still trips people up. Our word noon comes from nuns, the 9th canonical hour, which originally fell around 3 in the afternoon, not midday. Monks kept eating their main meal earlier and earlier, and the word noon just drifted forward with their stomachs until it landed on 12 o'clock, where it still sits today. I find it genuinely funny that lunchtime hunger accidentally rewrote the clock. None of this stayed locked inside monastery walls, either. Ordinary towns had no personal clocks, so the nearest church bell became the whole neighborhood's timekeeper. Basically, an entire town's push notification system, except you couldn't mute it, and ignoring it had real consequences. A bell told farmers when to start work. A bell told merchants when the market opened. In most towns, a bell told everyone when to put their fires out for the night, under a rule that came to be called the Curfew, literally, cover fire. Miss that one, and the city gates could lock with you standing on the wrong side. Some trace the practice in England, specifically to William the Conqueror, said to have ordered an evening bell across Norman territory, though the same fire safety rule shows up all over medieval Europe regardless of who actually gets the credit. So bells weren't background noise in some quaint painting. They were the operating system running an entire town's day, whether you were a monk, a farmer, or a merchant closing up his stall. But the bell only told you when a stretch of time began and ended. It never told you how long that stretch actually was. Dig into that question, and medieval time gets genuinely strange. Kill the next assumption too. We assume an hour has always meant one fixed length. It hasn't. For most of the Middle Ages, it meant something closer to 1/12 of however much daylight you happened to get that day. This system is called Temporal Hours, or Unequal Hours, and it's older than the Middle Ages, inherited from the Babylonians and Romans. Medieval Europe just ran on it for over 1,000 years anyway. Daylight, sunrise to sunset, got carved into 12 equal segments no matter the season. Night got its own separate 12. The result? A daylight hour near the summer solstice could last close to 80 minutes. That same daylight hour in December could shrink to around 40. Nearly double. Same word, same clock face, same year. Telling time inside that system took real tools. Sundials were everywhere, from grand cathedral installations down to small marks scratched straight into church walls, called mass dials, used just to mark service times. You can still find some of them today, worn smooth by 700 years of weather. A sundial, though, is useless the moment the sun disappears. So they built backups. Water clocks, called Clepsydras, let water drip at a steady rate to mark elapsed time regardless of weather. A scholar monk named Gerbert of Aurillac reportedly built one around the year 996, decades before he became Pope, Sylvester I.E. Candle clocks did a similar job with wax instead of water. Mark a candle at even intervals, light it, and watch the hours burn away. King Alfred the Great is said to have used marked candles inside a horn lantern specifically to divide his day evenly between prayer, work, and rest, according to his own biographer. By the 1300s, sand-filled hourglasses joined the toolkit too, especially at sea, where a ship's crew would flip one every half hour and ring a bell to mark it. The direct ancestor of what sailors still call the ship's bell today. And at night, when even a candle wasn't reliable enough, some monks and sailors reached for something almost nobody remembers today. A handheld tool called a nocturnal, which tracked the slow nightly rotation of stars around the North Star to read off the approximate hour. The way you might glance at a phone screen in the dark. Genuinely impressive when you consider it took this many separate machines just to answer one question. What time is it? This flexible, sun-chasing system worked fine for a monk or a farmer whose whole rhythm bent around daylight anyway. It was a disaster for anyone trying to run a market, a payroll, or a shipping schedule. You cannot pay 10 workers by the hour when an hour's length changes with the calendar. Someone was about to build a machine that didn't care what the sun was doing at all. Sometime in the final decades of the 1200s, in workshops nobody bothered to record, European craftsmen cracked a mechanical puzzle that had stumped inventors for centuries. How do you make a falling weight release its energy in small, steady, repeating steps, instead of one uncontrolled crash? Their answer was a mechanism called the verge-and-foliot escapement. A weight pulls a gear train. A rocking bar, weighted at both ends, catches and releases one tooth of that gear train at a time, ticking it forward in a steady rhythm. Wind the weight up by hand each morning, and gravity did the rest all day, tooth by tooth. No sun required, no candle, no water. Just gravity, gears, and a bar that refused to stop rocking. It was the first machine in history built to divide time into truly equal mechanical pieces. Real ones followed fast. Milan had a public striking clock by the 1330s. Salisbury Cathedral's clock, installed in 1386, still runs today and is widely considered the oldest working mechanical clock on Earth. It has no face at all, only bells, because back then nobody needed to look at a clock. You just listened. A few years later, Wells Cathedral added something new, an actual clock face, plus a set of mechanical knights that spin out and joust each other on the quarter hour, still doing it more than 600 years later. Twist nobody sees coming. These early machines were nowhere near accurate. A verge-and-foliot clock could drift by roughly 15 to 30 minutes a day. Over a single month, that's up to 15 hours lost or gained, nearly a full day of error, from a machine everyone still trusted more than the weather. That's not a typo. Why bother then? A mechanical clock never clouded over. It never needed the sun to show up. It ran through storms, through winter fog, through moonless nights, and it always divided the day into the same 24 equal hours, whether the sun cooperated or not. For merchants and city governments, that reliability mattered more than precision. Basically, they traded a rubber ruler for a steel one, and just accepted that the steel one still needed adjusting by hand every morning. Not just a better gadget for telling time. A transfer of power, from the sky to whoever controlled the machine. Time was never something they simply had. It was something they built, by hand, hour by hour. And the people who controlled it were about to turn that power on everyone else's day. In 1370, King Charles V of France did something no medieval ruler had really done before. He installed a mechanical clock on the Palais de la Cité in Paris, then issued an order that every church bell in the city had to ring in step with it. Read that again. The church had run time in Europe for close to 1,000 years. With one royal decree, official time in the capital of France quietly changed hands, from the bishop's bell to the king's machine. You can feel how big that shift was. Time stopped being God's flexible, seasonal rhythm and became a fixed civic resource, owned and issued from the top. Workers felt the change fastest of all. In Flemish cloth towns, whole workforces operated on strict work bells. A bell to start the shift, a bell for the midday break, a bell to end the day. Sounds neutral, until you ask who controlled the rope. Employers had every incentive to ring the starting bell a little earlier and the closing bell a little later, quietly stretching a paid day into a longer unpaid one. Workers noticed. In one such town, Aix-sur-l'Allier, a 1335 charter banned the work bell from ringing before daybreak, specifically to stop employers from padding out the shift. An early legal fight over who got to define an hour's length and who profited from bending it. Historians still argue over the finer details, but the pattern itself is unmistakable. Clock time didn't just track the day, it became something people fought over. The stakes went past wages too. Curfew bells still locked city gates every night. Miss that bell, and you weren't just shut out of your own house. You could be locked outside the walls entirely, in the dark, with wolves, thieves, and armed night watchmen who assumed anyone still moving after curfew was up to no good. The wealthy paid torch-carrying boys to walk them home before the last bell rang. Everyone else just had to know the schedule and respect it, or take their chances in the dark. Basically, the medieval version of clocking in and clocking out, except getting it wrong could get you locked outside your own city, not just docked an hour's pay. By now, time had stopped being a gentle village soundtrack. It was contested, political, occasionally dangerous. And the people building the next generation of clocks were about to raise the stakes again, aiming not just at your workday, but at the entire sky. Somewhere in the 1330s, the abbot of Stolburn's Abbey in England set out to build the most advanced clock in the world. His name was Richard of Wallingford. And he did it while suffering from leprosy, working through failing health to finish a machine that tracked the hour, the phase of the moon, and even the tides at London Bridge, all in one device. He wrote a full treatise explaining the mechanism, in case anyone doubted a dying man could design something this ambitious. Not a small flex, either. It's one of the most sophisticated machines built anywhere in Europe for the next 200 years. Richard wasn't alone in that ambition. Cathedral towns across Europe entered something close to an arms race, competing to build the most spectacular astronomical clock they could afford, sometimes spending sums close to what it cost to raise a small castle. In Padua, a physician named Giovanni de Dondi spent 16 years building an astrarium that modeled the motion of the sun, the moon, and all 5 planets known at the time, gear by painstaking gear. Strasbourg built its own. So did several other major cities. The most famous survivor still runs today in Prague. Installed in 1410, its Orloj shows the hour, the zodiac, and the current phase of the moon, sends a parade of mechanical apostles past a small window every hour, while a skeleton figure representing death reaches up and rings a bell. Basically a medieval planetarium, bolted to a bell tower, built with tools mostly designed for shoeing horses. These weren't built to help anyone catch a meeting. They were built to model the entire medieval universe. The sun, the moon, the zodiac, the saint's calendar, God's whole design, compressed into brass and iron and set spinning above a town square. The French philosopher Nicole Oresme, writing in the 1300s, described God as a master clockmaker who built the universe like an enormous clock and then let it run on its own. An idea that would echo for centuries, all the way into Newton's era. I genuinely cannot picture the confidence it took to look at a pile of gears and iron and think, yes, this can represent the entire cosmos. Think about the distance covered in just 5 chapters. A monk pulling a rope by hand at 2 a.m, sundials scratched into stone, candles burning down inside a horn lantern, a machine that ignored the sun completely, a king seizing time itself as a political weapon. And now, a clock ambitious enough to claim it modeled God's own universe. One step still remained. The step where the human hand disappeared completely. Go back to that first bell rope, the one the sacristan pulled at 2 a.m. to summon a monastery to matins. For 1,000 years, some version of that same act repeated itself in thousands of towers across Europe. A human being, personally, physically, pulling a rope to mark a moment in time. No machine did it for you. If the sacristan overslept, the bell simply didn't ring, and neither did the day's entire schedule. Now picture that same bell in the same tower, generations later. Its bronze has gone dull with weather. Its rope has frayed and been replaced a dozen times over. And one morning, an iron hammer connected to a mechanical clock's gear train swings forward and strikes it, exactly on schedule, with absolutely nobody standing at the rope at all. That's the real ending of this story. Not a new gadget, a transfer. For 1,000 years, keeping time required a person. Someone to watch the shadow lengthen. Someone to check the candle's mark. Someone to find the North Star and read the sky like a clock face. Someone tired and freezing at 2 a.m. who showed up anyway because the whole town depended on it. Piece by piece, tool by tool, that responsibility moved out of human hands and into gears that never got tired and never needed sleep. Remember that hour from the very start of this video? The one that stretched to 80 minutes in June and shrank to 40 in December? The mechanical clock finally killed that flexible hour for good. Every hour became exactly the same length, all year, everywhere, whether the sun agreed or not. Something was gained. Reliability, precision, an hour you could actually plan around. And something was quietly lost, too. The sun no longer got a vote in how your day was measured. So the next time your phone buzzes with a notification you didn't ask for, remember it has ancestors. A sacristan's cold feet on stone, a candle burning inside a horn lantern, a king's decree over a city's bells, an abbot with leprosy tracking the tides from a sickbed. None of them lacked a sense of time. If anything, they had too many senses of it, all running at once, and somebody always had to reconcile them by hand. Time was never something they simply had. It was something they built, by hand, hour by hour. That 1,000-year apprenticeship in measuring the sky by hand is the quiet ancestor of every clock, calendar, and countdown timer you have ever glanced at without thinking. And when the last bell finally rang itself, that job quietly ended, and ours began. If stories like this, the ones that live in the details nobody ever teaches you, are your kind of history, stay close. There's a lot more buried in that hour you just spent watching.